and please welcome Derek Curtin, Chairman of the Telecom Council of Silicon Valley.
Great. Thank you. Thank you in the back. Ladies and gentlemen, my mom, and I'm not kidding. So, but it's nice to be appreciated, isn't it? So great. Hope you all had some good curry for lunch. Welcome back. We're going to have some more carriers telling us about some partnerships that have been successful, and then we'll have a carrier panel as well that will give us a wrap up of a group of carriers together. We'll get all of their innovation slides out in a unit and have a great discussion. The chairs are ready for them, and we'll wrap up the day just after that. So our next discussion takes us out to the Southern Hemisphere. We're going to hear from Telstra and their partner Cohere. So I'd like to invite up Mark Sherman and Shlomo Rakib. Gentlemen. Great. So, Mark and Shlomo, I think everybody here is pretty much getting used to the drill on these case studies. It starts with the telco talking a bit about themselves, and we roll into the partnership from there. So over to you, Mark.
Yeah, sure. So, basically Telstra is the leading player in telecommunications in Australia. Prides itself on a lot of industry firsts. So rolled out LTE first in Asia, has rolled out lots of different aspects. A buddy of mine that's a software sales guy said it's at least one of the first 5 accounts you call when you're in the software space. And ultimately...
Isn't that like my mom copying for me, though? A buddy of yours says you're one of the best?
Yeah. Well, yes. He's a close enough friend such that he would tell me...
I can't say the same for my mom. She'd clap regardless, I think.
So, obviously, as an operator, the network is probably one of the most heart and lung aspects of our business. And being interested in next generation networks, 5G, et cetera, is super important to us, just as a company, and then especially for us on the venture side. And ultimately, what our responsibility is, and we've made, now there's 24 investments in the last 3.5 years, is make investments around companies that are acting where Telstra wants to go. And, we have a bunch of cloud investments, a bunch of mobile apps investments, some, billing investments, et cetera. And, as I said before, if we want to make an investment, there's this whole process in order to make something happen. And the easiest way for us to make an investment is to have the networks guys say that they love a certain company. And, and I'm happy to say that they love Cohere. And there's, the reasons for that are a couple-fold, but, I think they're both hard and soft. And on the hard side, it basically comes down to near 100% coverage in terms of what they can deliver with their product. 2 is 10x spectral efficiency. Mm-hmm. And then 3 is at 50% cost. And so when you get sort of the capability side mixed with the bean counting side, that gets to a lot of excitement.
You can get some momentum out of those two powerful groups.
So that's the hard side of it. The soft side is really around the people. Yep. And it's maybe kind of a good segue to Shlomo. But I think what really attracted us to the investment is his kind of philosophy about, good people build good products. Yep. And good products build good companies. And particularly in a very standards-based market where there's a lot of politics and a lot of different interests weaving around, his philosophy is let's build something great, then let's get real guys like us to play with it. Yep. And validate that we have, and then let's take that and kind of work its way through the ecosystem. So why don't I use that as sort of a way of kicking it over to Shlomo? Sure. Yeah.
Shlomo.
A little bit background on Cohere and what's Cohere about. I met my partner, his name is Ronnie Hadani. He's a professor of mathematics at UT Austin. At the time, he tells me about his research field, which I never heard about it before, representation theory. A little bit, Skype sessions with him, a little bit of MATLAB simulations, and all of a sudden we both realized eventually how valuable this could be to wireless. It's such a paradigm shift that I may dare to tell you, you can throw away all your books and everything you know about wireless we completely changed essentially how wireless behave and how this modulation interacts with the channel, to the extent that we reveal the geometry and extract essentially capacity and scale much, much better than anything you know today. Our company was founded in end of 2009. We had major investors, went very, very conservative. We built prototypes and then raised money. We went to field trials, and we raised more money. We showed test results, and then we raised more money. So at the end of the day, as Mark has said, being able to deliver at the end on your promise is the best thing that any startup could hope for. The company is all based in Santa Clara. We are about 50 people at this time. Well capitalized, and again, thanks to that partnership with carriers, Telstra in particular, essentially we're able to get out and show essentially the benefits that we bring, and eventually continue to go and execute on our plans. The ability to extract Shannon capacity is what everybody in this kind of wireless industry is trying to strive for. The ability to achieve that channel capacity with minimum feedback is definitely a bigger challenge. Scaling with coverage, scaling with a number of devices, scaling with SNR, achieving that 10x or may I even 100x, taking advantage of the nature and the way essentially that modulation is capable of extracting channel state information and be able to mitigate interference. These are part of the things that we are continuously essentially building and demonstrating. The team is everything. My partner is a very, very nice person to work with, and we were able to attract around a lot of good talent, people with a lot of experience, with a track record that could deliver, and eventually that combination of technology, people, is eventually what's about to become a startup, is taking that fuzziness at the beginning and eventually and bring it to something more clearer and tangible. Last, if I may, is essentially 5G and all the new use cases, the extra link budget, the 100 or 1,000 times more demand for capacity, the number of devices that is going to grow immensely, the sensors that you want to put everywhere. I mean, all of these requirements is very, very hard to meet with existing LTE, and I may say also it's almost unachievable. This new modulation is going to be the key, essentially, to enable that 5G and enable to meet all of these demands and all of these requirements. Just kind of give you a sample of all the different results that we were able to achieve. Essentially, this graph shows the tolerance to mobility, the invariance to channel conditions. And again, in here, what we show is whether it's a 5 Hertz Doppler shift or 300 Doppler shift, whether you're a pedestrian or you're a train running at 300 miles an hour, the performance, the capacity doesn't change, and we're able eventually to scale with the SNR, as you can see, scale with the number of antennas, and again show that tolerance, high tolerance to channel conditions. Okay.
Okay. Well, that's quite a broad promise, and there's a number of companies that emerge every year that have very big promises with respect to what they can do with existing frequencies and better spectral efficiencies they can deliver. And I think historically people look at that with skepticism, right? And if I just had you, Shlomo, up here on the stage, I think that would be probably what everybody's thinking. Yeah, okay, but really? Like, can I do that in a real world scenario? But it's very different with Mark sitting next to you, right? And Telstra saying, no, we've tried this stuff and we like it. So that's kind of makes this a lot more concrete. So I think everybody wants to hear more about it. So Mark, tell me a little bit how you found it, and how did you guys approach it with that skepticism?
Yeah, I mean, and I think just to give people a sense, I mean, on the venture side, we've looked at 2,800 companies in the last 3 odd years, and we've invested in 24.
Yep.
Right. So there's sort of a high filter, and there are lots of broad promises, and what the big print giveth, oftentimes the small print taketh away.
Yeah.
And I think that we first met basically around this time last year, maybe a little over a year ago. And, we had some of the more important people from Telstra connecting us with the situation.
Yeah.
And, really dug in with a lot of kind of conference room / conference call analytics, shall I say. And then over time, people validated the thinking. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, we actually tested this in the field, and that happened as recently as this past May.
Yep.
I believe, Shlomo, correct me if I'm wrong, this is probably our chart.
This is your
Yeah,
chart.
and this was sort of the results.
So this is not Shlomo's marketing chart. This is Telstra's.
This is from our guys, basically.
That's pretty important.
And and what I will say is the guys were sort of looking at their test equipment to make sure that it was operating properly to validate the results, and they were pleasantly surprised with, you just don't get these types of data in ways where, in particular, this Doppler thing that Shlomo was talking about, what attracts us, everybody's interested in 5G around the bulk side of the market, the spectral efficiency side of just kind of getting, megabits or gigabits through at big volumes. But I think the trick is then marrying it with the capabilities in trickier use cases. So around, corporate canyons and those types of situations.
Because, there's a multi-phase doubt when you hear a great promise like what Shlomo's got. And the first step is, well, I don't believe it, show me your documents. And you see the documents, and very often the science is firm. Like, oh yeah, you're going to go from 128 QAM to 256 QAM. That's going to get better throughputs and the same amount of spectrum. Fantastic. And so then the science is sound, and yet when you deploy it into a live network, you get the theory and the beauty of the lab environment clashes with the reality of downtown Sydney in your case and stuff, which is a radically different environment, or even worse, Ayers Rock or something like that, which has different densities. So you guys get through that paper stage, validated the science. How did you make the leap to make an investment and actually try it? Shlomo, did you help them get over that hump and help them, how did you minimize the risk so that they were willing to look at you more deeply?
A few words about Telstra and the investment group here. I've never met a group of people that so capable, so talented, so knowledgeable.
Yep.
And for us, essentially, it was both a very pleasant and learning experience. The team there essentially have gone through all generations, first generation, 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, so they knew everything that had to be known in wireless. And that team eventually, without yet fresh approach and no NIH or no, I know all of that. You can't took a fresh look and trying to get to the essence of why this works and why it works and how it works, and eventually kind of validated that through these tests and helped us eventually characterize the test and go through all the hurdles eventually to prove that indeed that technology works, and eventually it became almost a partnership in a sense, and it was a really pleasant experience.
So did they help you develop your solution further, or were they the first time you actually got to try it out? Or
in a way force you to why does it work, and what are the principles behind, and articulate it better. Okay. So that's kind of was and as I said, at times participate in articulate essentially the value proposition.
Mark.
And maybe, Derek, just to kind of put a cap on it in terms of I think what you're looking for.
Yeah.
We met maybe 2 Augusts ago.
Yep.
And then I think through the fall until about the holiday season.
Yeah.
We basically, went through a lot of this analytics and, days of work basically of making sure that people understood it. And then we actually decided to invest in the company, and I think signed a term sheet over the holidays, and then closed in early February, I want to say, or maybe actually it's maybe late February.
Again, it took a year. It sounds easy, but it really took a year, and definitely the geographic distance, and but again, at the end, it's the people on both sides, the chemistry that developed, the trust and the confidence built is essentially what made that happen. And in a way, eventually, Telstra realizing the value, us eventually valuing that partnership in a great way, and it never stops eventually. A partner like Telstra is just taking us and opening doors and validating. So again, it's pretty valuable, and I want to thank them for that.
So Shlomo, walk me through a quick explanation. Apparently it took Mark's team months and months. Assume the room can get it in 60 seconds or less. So what is OTFS? What is it doing?
Okay, so OTFS stands for Orthogonal Time, Frequency, and Space. The principle is very simple. In a wireless world, essentially, is the biggest impediment is multipath. You have a source, you have a destination, the receiver gets multiple replicas of the same signal being transmitted. These replicas are shifted in time, shifted in frequency. OTFS is about decomposing the received signals into all of these replicas and being able to coherently add them up.
So you're utilizing the multipath.
We are absolutely leveraging every path and collecting energy in a very coherent way. If you look at what's happening today in OFDM, it's about every pilot experiences a different channel. All of these reflections, every reflection is the phase changes so rapidly. So at the receiver end, you got an interaction between all of these paths that it looks random, that looks non-deterministic, non-stationary.
Is that like a rake filter on the receiving end, or like on a CDMA?
So you bet. We have eventually time and frequency and space, all these three dimensions, the ability to collect energy properly and eventually rebuild the signal in a coherent.
So we heard that before. It's like the jiu-jitsu of the seller in wireless world, but essentially using the weakness as a strength. And okay, we're going to have multipath. Let's send a different signal down each one of those. And that's also what MIMO does. So is it really is it MIMO, or is it MIMO on top of multipath?
That's MIMO on top of multipath. I mean, it's really, Doppler, and when you have multiple Doppler components today, essentially wireless technology doesn't deal well with Doppler and multipath, with each one having a different Doppler.
So
we're dealing with that.
So what does Claude Shannon say about this? Does this kind of repeat it?
Shannon really is, he predicted OTFS in a way. Anyway, Shannon doesn't care about eventually how you do it. It says you have X number of antennas, that's the capacity you should be able to do. You can do spatial multiplexing. So we're making Shannon happen.
So his limit, the Shannon limit, is really about a single path. And so you can defeat that limit by using this MIMO plus your multipath utilization techniques. All right, so let's get into this.
And the other point that's probably important to mention is just that they do it in a deterministic way.
Yeah.
So you know what the results are going to be.
The channel representation is a two-dimensional representation that includes both time and frequency, which is again different than other modulation techniques.
And it's working with moving. Obviously, Telstra wants to be mobile, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any speed limitations, like 100 km an hour, 200 km an hour?
No, it actually scales very nicely. We can tolerate very high Dopplers, enabling also the millimeter wave. And millimeter wave, slow movement becomes a many hertz, hundreds of hertz in Doppler shift.
So Mark, what does Telstra do with this? I mean, it's a radical departure from the standards-based approach, right? So now do you say this is good, we validated, let's get this into standards? Or where do you
well, I mean, in there, I think we're sort of want to go with Shlomo's philosophy, which is, let's work on the backhaul side first, then look at fixed wireless access next.
Yep.
And then let's look further downstream around 5G-oriented things. And so, prove it, tweak it, iterate.
Right.
And then ultimately guide ourselves into the standards orientation.
So Shlomo, is that consistent with your company vision? Like, the different ambitions. So you'd like to, and do you see yourself fitting into the 5G fold, or is that too soon for you to get your technology in?
We're actively participating in 3GPP meetings and or proposing essentially OTFS as part of a standard. And starting Mobile World Congress last year, or this year actually, we started eventually evangelizing OTFS. Trying to explain essentially principle of operation and get the support from industry leaders, whether it's carriers or vendors in this case.
So Mark, what you've got here is a unique partnership of the ones we're talking about here at TC3. It's not like, we're working with them to address the enterprise market or something different. You're trying to, a carrier's role normally is to say, there's the standard, we buy the radios from this tier one vendor, we ask them to be standards compliant, we deploy. Here you're getting involved at a much deeper level as a venture capitalist and then also as early adopter of the ideas. How has that changed the game as a telecom company?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm honest and direct, it hasn't yet changed the game for us. But as I started earlier, there's nothing more heart and lung for Telstra than what our networks are.
Right.
And we think that this is, and we had, some of our smartest wireless engineering guys go nuts on this for months and months and months.
Yeah.
And, to your point, you had a couple quick questions of playing Stump the Chump, basically.
Yeah.
And they went Stump the Chump crazy on Shlomo and his team for a long time. And they came back, and ultimately their, headline was, you have to pay attention to new modulation strategies. And this is one of the most exciting things we've seen in a long time.
Yep.
And as such, as you're looking at 5G and sort of a story arc that's going to take, 4 or 5 years to play out, and you're planning your network, you want to be as early as you can to start to think about how we can work with a core vendor in this space and start to think about how we want to shine its best facets for our end customers.
It's pretty neat. Like you're saying you're going to start with that backhaul link. Well, that's something where you can go entirely proprietary if you wish. It's still lacks the standards-based handsets up to the tower, and then something experimental in that backhaul. In fact, that's a place where a lot of innovation goes first. A, because it's a big challenge to backhaul, especially a few years back and such. And B, because you have full control, right? And control. You don't have to work with Samsung handsets and Apple at the same time. So it's a good place to kind of emerge. Shlomo, have you, I want to call out people as they're relevant as the part of TC3. So Astrapi has a demo in there, and they're doing something also with modulation, doing a spiral modulation scene. Have you seen them and looked at them? And can you compare at all?
No, I haven't.
Okay, fair enough. It would probably be an unfair comparison without having them have a rebuttal anyways. You should say, well, we're better. And then, right, so there are other interesting ways of going about this, right? So there's a lot of people who say, we got a new way to skin the cat that can deliver more bandwidth. Mark, is it a matter of you found something, you put it through the test that satisfied your needs? Are you always looking for the best possible technology or something that, how do you pick?
We're always looking for the best possible technology, and we've probably looked at a dozen other approaches, and we like this one the best.
All right.
And ultimately it's with taking product or taking theory and then trying to debunk it in some way. And ultimately saying what's going to win in a 4 or 5 year time scale, and this is what we think will win.
So in respect to your deal making in general, as a Telstra representative here, do you generally do investment partnering, so your office yourself, or are you just doing scouting as well? Here's a good idea, I'll pass that through. What is your role on a month-to-month basis?
Yeah, so I lead the ventures group, and ultimately we have a dual mandate. We're trying to satisfy strategic Telstra, and we're trying to satisfy financial returns. On the strategic side, our metrics are geared towards revenue drivers, capability and cost drivers, and corporate development drivers.
Right.
And then on the financial side, it's basically IRR or multiple of return driven.
So when you see something, do you see startups that don't don't fit your goals as an investment, but you think, this could be interesting to this business unit, you just channel them through, or what do you do?
Yeah, all the time, and it's not uncommon where we will introduce a company that we like on the investing side. The business unit may have different priorities in the next couple quarters, so we might miss, round B or round C or round D, whatever it is. And then, cut to a year or 2 years later, there's been a good relationship that's evolved on the commercial side, and then we may come back on the investing side.
And so, and you're based here. And does Telstra do, they have a global, how do they watch for innovation globally speaking?
Yeah, so we have a couple folks here. We've got a bunch of people in Australia. We have a guy that we just lit up in Beijing. And we literally, you could be in Mali and you could be in Yemen. We're pretty agnostic in terms of where the companies are from. Having said that, obviously there's a lot of, core here. There's a lot in Israel that we track. A lot in, different parts of the world. And increasingly, we're spending time in Asia, just because we think that there's some interesting stuff coming out of China in particular right now.
And so, Shlomo, what are kind of next steps for you? Is it to focus and head down with Telstra, prove that case out, or are you already looking to broaden your relationships with carriers?
We definitely are broadening our relationship with carriers. I think we have had very good interactions with Orange, Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, Telefonica, and we continue essentially broadening essentially the relationship in the U.S. and outside the U.S.
Is that, then obviously that plays, if you want to become part of a standard, it plays in to have all these people aware and kind of saying, oh, that we like that. So is that, is it because you want to be in the standard and they'll follow, or because you actually want to do biz dev and get these, like, you start getting all these proof of concept to all those carriers you just mentioned, I don't know what happened to your resources, right? So how do you rise to that level of demand if you had to?
The company is working on two threads simultaneously. One is the 5G, as you said, and the other one is products. Eventually, 5G is 2020, in any of the optimistic would say 2018. It's still a long time, and we still need to put food on the table for the rest of the company and continue to grow the company. So we're kind of working hand in hand with promoting the product, trying to get the sales, and on the same side promote 5G. And the good thing about it is synergetic. I mean, you go and present 5G, and by the way, you get introduced to the network planning people, and eventually kind of look at the product to see how that could help solve a use case here and a pain point there. So it really comes hand in hand. And really OTFS here is about the deterministic delivery of any amount of payload where you need it, when you need it. And that resonates very well both for 5G and for the product itself.
So was Mark part of a more widely syndicated round, or was it just Telstra in that round?
It was, Mark led the round, but it was a larger round with multiple strategic.
So that gave you kind of more resources to do the kind of mission, this broadening mission you're talking about.
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll work towards wrapping up. But Mark, I want to just like I said, I like to give shout outs from time to time. Can you go back a couple of slides? So Zimperium just won a Spiffy Award last night. I just noticed when you flashed by this this little sticker slider. So tell me quickly, in a 30-second, your thoughts on that if you were involved in that one. And
yeah, no, I personally was involved with it, and basically, in case you guys don't know about Zimperium, it's a mobile security play, and they have had a lot of notoriety in recent past because just before Black Hat, they announced Stage Fright, which is basically weaknesses around Android that can be exploited for forces of darkness. And then just yesterday, they announced Stage Fright 2.0, which is an additional weakness that's related to it as it relates to Android. And Telstra's a big customer of this, and we think because we're a mobile operator, we should be really way out in front as it relates to mobile security.
Yep.
And then we're helping particularly our larger enterprise customers, banks, retailers, et cetera, get educated in terms of, from banks, I mean, they've got gold everywhere, and people are stealing their informational gold on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And the number of threats coming over the mobile channels are increasing radically. And so we really need to button this down very quickly.
Are you guys in the rooms, Imperium?
They were here yesterday. Oh yeah, there's Srini.
Right.
Yeah, there he is. Right there. And it's a bunch of guys, originally, and if people in the audience know about the 8200 unit out of the Israeli Defense Force, it's a guy out of that group who, is a cyber hacker for Israel.
Great. So Shlomo, I'm just going to give you the last word, a little open, any final thoughts you want to close with, and then we'll wrap up.
I think eventually OTFS is a radical paradigm shift that really enables all the new use cases and applications, starting from an extra 30 dB in link budget, or high tolerance to extreme Doppler 4 kilohertz, or scale the number of antennas and interference mitigation, and all of these eventually all together is part of that OTFS framework that we built over the last 6 years. And we'll definitely kind of, anybody in the audience or outside the audience would be interested, would love to kind of show and tell them more and get them on that wagon and make the future happen.
So as an end customer, it basically means more cat videos, right?
That's absolutely.
You're going to give me more, then good for you. All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Terry.